Hello, today I'm going to present how we approach the development of new functionality. So I'm going to focus basically on the understanding what kind of functionality we need, what is the value of this functionality in terms of how does it contribute for the stakeholders of the application, users and everybody that is involved in the application. And as well, try to have an idea about the complexity. So how complex is going to be to implement that functionality. So it's a little bit of requirements engineering, a little bit of managing the risk, understanding what should be done first, how do you decompose things. So it's all these small tasks that you need to do before you actually start implementing. So I pick a particular functionality that is becoming relevant now. I call it quiz tutor administration. And the main idea is that, so the system has been used for a single course, and we have done a lot of this administration stuff, accessing directly the database, changing the database. But these type of activities become a bit of an overhead as soon as you start needing to support several courses, several organizations. So actually I just wrote here one sentence. You can see the sentence here. And this sentence tries a bit to give this idea of what is the main goal of this functionality. So this functionality, which is the administration of the system, is defined by a set of features that simplify the administration of the quiz tutor system, what is being used in the context of several courses or several organizations. So what's going to be our strategy to address this? So we've been looking at several tools or several methods that we can use, and actually picked one method called Kanban for development. And it's a method that tries to decompose this process of understanding what are the requirements into a set of features and provide the value to the features. So I'm going to describe this a little bit. We're not going to use it completely, so you are going to adapt for our needs. But the main idea is basically to have a first part where you have a pool of ideas, and these are the ideas where you identify the features that would be interesting to achieve the goal of your system, of your functionality. In the second part, you move these ideas or some of these ideas that you find more interesting or that during the discussion you consider that may be more interesting, and you move them to the feature preparation part. And in the feature preparation part, basically you define more explicit what is going to be the business value for them. So it means that, well, what is going to be the advantage of having these implemented in the system. And as well as the business value, also we want to identify the complexity. So how complex is going to be to implement them. Once you have detail for some of the features, this information, you start pick or decide which ones you're going to implement next. So we are following an incremental development approach where you implement usually some features that provide more value or, for instance, that are more simple. So if such that your team can learn a little bit and start with something that's simpler. So it depends a lot of the context and is driven by risk management. So it's a decision that you take considering several factors around your project. So the features that you move from feature preparation to feature select are the features that you are going to implement. So features that are here are going to be decomposed in small tasks that are going to be implemented. I'm not going to address these now because here we are going to use Scrum. This is going to be the subject of another video. But I'm going to just tell you that after you implement these features become accepted, or they go for acceptance from the final user, and they are deployed and finally delivered. But Today I'm going to focus, for the case of the system administration, on this part. So let's return to GitHub. In GitHub you have this nice feature, you can define projects. So what I have done is to define a project, quiz tutor administration, for this functionality. And as you're going to see, I just decompose this project into a set of features, in a set of columns. They call it columns here. Into a set of columns. And I'm going to just put it full screen. And I follow a little bit the idea that you have seen in Kanban. So on the first column you have the pool of ideas. And here you have something like an administrator dashboard. And I just wrote one or two sentences that make these ideas more concrete, such that you can have a brainstorming with your colleagues whether they are more or less relevant. For instance, in this case, we are considering the administrator dashboard, an import-export information about the execution course, which may be relevant, because if you think about it, it would be nice to provide or to allow each teacher to import and export information of the execution course without asking the administrator to do it, or just that the administrator can do it himself or herself by using some format and using some external files, okay? And for instance, delete an execution course. In the column about feature preparation are the features that the team decides that are more relevant, okay? And now you're going to work on them, and you're going to do is basically define what is the value, the business value of them, and the complexity. And of course you may make the functionality more concrete, more precise, define more precisely the functionality, because this actually will help you to evaluate or to know about or to think about the value and the complexity. So for this feature, list course executions, you see that we have identified that the complexity is low because we have no new domain entities, so it's only one user interface. So basically, what does it do? So it goes to the database, does a query, get the data, and presents the data in the interface. So the complexity is low. Well, the value is high, because that way you don't need to, so the administrator does not need to access a database and do some queries in the database to know how many courses there are, and so to know information about the system. So it has a low complexity and high value. So another one is to anonymize the course execution student. Why this is relevant? Well, you know, so at the end of the semester, you don't want to keep this information in the system. So what you want to keep, you want to keep information about what are the results of the students, such that you can maybe do some kind of learning after and improve your system so that the system can guide the learning process of the students. But you don't want to have concrete information about the students. So it would be nice that at the end of the semester, the administrator, just by clicking on something, basically it just anonymizes the information about the students while preserving all the results so that we can work on them later. Okay? So it's a nice feature. We consider that the complexity is low, so you don't need to define new domain entities, but you need to do some verification that you don't delete data that is relevant, okay? And that you do not keep data that do not anonymize the student. And the value, we consider that is low because it's going to be executed only at the end of the semester, and maybe you can do it with an update directly in the database, but will become more higher. The value will increase as you have more and more courses using the system. Now let's move to the feature selection column. In the feature selection column, you move basically the features that you decide to implement. So now, when you have a feature here, it means that you are going to implement this feature. In this example, the feature we're going to implement is to support ad hoc course executions. Why? What is the goal of this? Well, the goal of this is to allow people from other organizations to use the system. So we want to do, let's look at the functionality. We want to allow to create a new course execution, for instance, that is not part of technical. We want to load the teachers and students to the information to the course execution, maybe it's through a CVS file or a comment separated value file, and load the students' information to a course. This can be also done by the teacher, not only by the administrator, support password update. So you have this type of functionalities that are relevant for the system administrator. And it has a high value. It has a high value because it's going to be support people from other organizations to use our system. But of course, the complexity is high because now we're going to need to define a lot of domain entities like ad hoc users, different several user interfaces just to create these, to change the password, update, and so on. So what is relevant here when you define the complexity is that you need to look at your domain model and see what is the impact on the domain model that these new features have when they are going to be implemented. Finally, for each feature that you selected, so we call it F1, you give it an identifier. It's nice to have an identifier here. We're going to compose this feature into a set of tasks to be implemented. And again, the idea is the same. The same way that you just are decomposing your functionality into a set of features that can be incrementally implemented, we are going to follow the same tactic. And basically for each feature, we are going to define a set of tasks that can be incrementally implemented. So this is really nice when you do software development because it reduces the feedback cycle as you learn. So if you implement something in a short period of time and you show them to the users, you can get feedback and improve the next cycle of development. So in this case, you have used the identifier if1 and then just decompose in several tasks that we're going to implement. So we call it stories. We'll see, probably story is a better name now because we use task afterwards, but you decompose into stories and each story addresses a particular function, a particular part of the system that can be implemented in isolation by itself. Of course, you may find dependencies between the stories. So the first one is to create a new course execution. So to create a new course execution, what you need here to consider is that basically when you create a course execution, you need either you associate with a course that already exists or you basically create the new course as well. So we say that it is required as a constraint we define that is required by all other feature one functionalities, stories, okay? So this means that basically this probably is the story, the first story to be implemented. But let's look at the other stories that occur or that need to be implemented afterwards. For instance, load teachers and students information to a course execution. Of course, I'm describing that probably I'm going to use the CSV format containing name, email, and so on. So I define some information here, and I define this constraint. So another one that I've identified is support password update. So that, and I say that it only makes sense to support password update if you already have loaded the teachers and the students. So I say that it requires F1.2. And another one is that the teacher does the same thing and can load the information. Okay, so think is the way we expect you to work in this first phase. So it's basically you have your functionality, and for each functionality you are defining this decomposition into features in your project. As a final note, I would like to say that, look, it's relevant to use these in GitHub, and GitHub supports this. And of course, at the end is probably the best way to deliver so that we can access what we have done. But you can do this on top of a table with a paper, so you can discuss this. You don't need to work directly with the GitHub, okay? Because probably is not the best from the point of view of space, from the point of view of usability. It probably is not the best way to do it. But at the end, I think you should have your stories, your features here, so that we can you can record and you can work with them in the next phases. Okay, good work.